The Orion welder is a pulsed arc welder. That means that it creates an electrical pulse of energy, which creates a plasma gas, a very high temperature gas, that creates the molten pool of metal, the weld spot. And so hence the pulse just means it happens once, and the arc is very much like a TIG welder, but a plasma stream. So the pulsed arc welder, the Orion, has actually 3 different modes. The first mode is the pulse arc mode, which is a high power pulse arc mode up to 230 joules of energy. The next mode is a very refined pulse arc mode, a micro pulse arc mode, if you will. The micro pulse arc mode has up to 30 watt seconds or 30 joules of energy, and all the way down to 1 joule of energy, and even further down if you'd like by reducing the length of the pulse. So the final mode is the spot mode. This is a resistance welding mode, very different from pulse arc welding. Spot mode is literally a spot weld is created. We have a positive and negative terminal where you'd hook your attachment in, and just like any other spot welder, you have electrodes that clamp the part, and hence you send electrical pulse through the electrodes through the part, and you melt the metal in a spot. Let's talk about other interface items. The power bar is adjusted with this knob here. You can adjust, later we'll learn how to adjust how many divisions are in the power bar. The length, first you select the select button, transfers you and highlights the length square, and then you can adjust the length there. The front menu also has a run stop mode. Now in run mode, the welder is on and is waiting for you to either touch the electrode to the workpiece to initiate the weld, or just for the foot pedal. In stop mode, the welder will not weld and ignores all outputs. Now the welder has an automatic timer inside to switch the welder to stop mode if a certain amount of time goes by. This just protects you from making sure you don't fire on accident if you haven't been using the welder for a while. Also, you can hold down the run stop button, and you can see that we're now we've been able to switch our trigger mode to foot. If I hold down the run stop button again, we switch to automatic mode. So that would mean that as soon as you touch the electrode to the workpiece, the welder will initiate the welding process. Also, the select button has an alternate function as well. If you hold the select button down, it will bring up your saved settings so that you can load them quickly. Right now you can see I have one saved setting called CO2. So we could clear that menu by pushing the menu button, or by pushing the run stop button takes you out of the menu system wherever you are. If I hold down the menu button, it brings up the presets that are already inside the welder, and I can use the knob to scroll down to find the preset that I want. Once I've found a preset, I select it with the select button, and I can choose a small, medium, or large. Now you should note that these presets are just to get you started. They give you a general range of spot size. These are all for pulse arc modes. But then you need to do an experiment. You test a similar piece to what you're working on, make sure that the spot size is what you would like, and after that you can adjust the setting. While we're at this platinum setting, we'll give an example. Let's say that I did a platinum weld here and it turned out to be a little larger than I would want. Simply go to the power bar and I could change my setting down a little bit. Now you'll notice that it took me out of the platinum preset into the scratch pad, and at this point I could save my setting, and we'll go through this in a subsequent video. I could save my setting to be able to repeat this in the future. Okay, let's go into the menu system. The main menu here pulls up several different categories. We will talk about saving and locking and deleting settings in a subsequent video. Let's go into the user preferences menu. I highlight it with the knob, push select, and it gives me another list of options. The beep toggle menu turns the beeps on or off. You select, push select to enable or disable beeps. I'm going to keep them enabled so we can tell when we're doing something. The screen contrast allows me to use the knob on the front to change the contrast to suit my preference. When I'm done, I just push the menu button, brings me back. The warning messages, I can turn those on and off. The welder contains several warning messages to keep you from using the wrong attachment or to make sure you have argon gas hooked up. If I don't want to see those warning messages, I can turn them off. It's very helpful to leave them on so that when you're a new user, so that you can just be familiar. I'm going to turn them off for us. We won't need them right now. Now there's a safety lockout timer. This is what I mentioned earlier. If the welder is not in use, the safety lockout timer will change the welder to stop mode after a predetermined time. You can change that to 1 minute if you expect to not be doing very large jobs, or 20 minutes if you expect to have to come back to the welder or whatever. But the safety lockout timer really won't initiate until you haven't done anything for that set time. I'm going to go down to the pre-flow Argonne Accelerator. Now this is a very useful feature. If you're doing many welds in a row, the pre-flow Argonne Accelerator makes sure that there's sufficient argon for the first weld, so it gives a longer pulse of argon for the very first weld. But then subsequent welds, it can give a very shortened argon pulse, because you no longer need to fill the whole tube. So in this menu I can select either turning the Argonne Accelerator off, or I can say after 10 seconds I want to restart the Argonne Accelerator function. That means the first pulse would be a long pulse of argon again, or 20 seconds. I'm going to select 10 seconds for this option. You should also note that most of these come with factory preset settings. You really don't have to adjust too many of these, but it gives you the option to do so if you want to. Also, I have the option to toggle between Spanish and English in the preferences section. Right now I'm in Spanish. For our purposes, we will switch back to English, and now we're in English. Now, to go back one menu, I simply push the menu button. If I wanted to go all the way out of the menu system, I would push the run stop button. I'm going to push the menu button and we'll move on to the next set. So the advanced options section. Push select to go into that menu. Here we have the trigger mode. Now remember again that I could push the run stop button from the front panel without being in the menu system. If I held that down, I'd switch between automatic or foot pedal. However, if I go into this, I can switch at will between automatic and foot pedal. I'll select automatic for now. Power adjustment steps. Sometimes, for many projects, it's useful to be pretty broad in your steps, so you can quickly adjust something, you can play with settings, get close, but also there are times when you really need some fine resolution. So you can adjust your power steps to 1%, 5%, or 10%, depending on your resolution. What I recommend would be 5% for most cases. Gets you very close, helps you to find the right setting quickly without having to turn the knob so much. So 5 is what we'll stay on. 5% increments of power. The gas flow is an interesting setting. This allows you to change how much argon is allowed to coat the weld site before, so you have amount of time here. So half a second, 1 second, 1.5 seconds. Now this interacts with the Argonne pre-flow accelerator as well. So The pre-flow accelerator, if that's turned on, will always give you 1.5 seconds for the initial weld. If you want to do subsequent welds very quickly after that, I recommend changing to 1/2 second as your pre-flow time. That way, subsequent welds will only take 1/2 second to produce the argon and initiate the weld. Now, after the weld has been produced, you also have the option of how much time do I want the gas to be on after the weld. So we have 50 milliseconds, 250 milliseconds, or 500. So in other words, we have a 1/4 second here and 1/2 second, or 50 thousandths of a second. So typically you don't need much gas afterwards. Some metals need more because they're a little more reactive and they stay hot. But typically a 1/4 second is more than sufficient. If you really want to be going fast on that pre-flow accelerator, and you'll be making a lot of subsequent welds, then 50 thousandths of a second, 50 milliseconds, is sufficient. But for now, let's do 1/4 second. Now the tip retraction is the next option. When we're welding with the Pulsar stylus here, the tip retraction helps us with our preference on how much pressure we apply to the tip. We should always apply very light pressure to the welding stylus tip, but some people have lighter pressure than others. So this allows us to determine what the optimal pressure is for us. Also, some metals are more prone to stick to the electrode, and this also helps us to eliminate that action. So the moderate pressure setting retracts the tip a little bit earlier than the other settings, about 1/2 millisecond. Now this may seem like a very short amount of time, and it is, but this is sufficient so that if you're a little bit more have a little bit more pressure, this allows the stylus to retract before any molten metal touches the electrode and contaminates your electrode. Now let's say you're already a fairly light touch type of person. This light setting of 0 milliseconds retracts the tip right as the weld is initiated. And then let's say you are super light, you have a very steady hand, and you're already a very light touch. Then this featherweight type setting retracts the tip just a little bit after the weld is initiated to make sure you ignite every time. I personally prefer the moderate setting because it helps me to not contaminate my electrode on accident. It gives me just a little bit more play. So I'll select moderate. Also, the tip retract setting allows us to say, how long do I want the electrode to be retract after the weld has been made? So we have, again, 50 milliseconds. That would be very short. It almost immediately comes down. 1/4 second, which is typically a pretty good setting. That means that your weld pool has time to solidify very, very much by then. And then we even have a longer setting of 1/2 second of retract time. And that's just to make sure that you never touch a molten pool. 1/4 second is a great setting. If you're doing lots of welds very quickly, 50 milliseconds would also be very good. But let's say 1/4 second for our purposes. Now we have the lens darkening time, or this could also be thought of as the microscope shutter closing time. In this menu, I get to select how early does the shutter close to protect my eyes from the welding flash, and then subsequently I'll select how long do I want it to be closed after the welding flash has occurred. Now, the beauty of the Orion welder is that it verifies that the microscope shutter has been closed before the welding takes place. So no matter what, the shutter will be closed before the welding takes place. But this can speed up that process, or so in other words, if I have it on short, I'll be seeing what I'm doing up to the very last 25 milliseconds. If I put it on long, it will close a 1/10 of a second before the weld takes place, So I may not see exactly what I'm doing, but I'm ensured that I'll have plenty of time there. So I recommend just keeping it on 50 milliseconds. The welder will ensure that the shutter has been closed, and this way you'll be able to see what you're doing up to the very last moment. Now, after the weld has occurred, there's a little bit of flash that still happens, a little bit of light bouncing off. So you can either have the lens open very quickly, or you can have a little more time involved there. I recommend just using the medium setting of 50 milliseconds. The weld flash happens very quickly and is gone, and so there's no real reason to keep it on for longer unless you feel so. So now it's given me the correct lens darkening time. Let's go back one menu again by pushing the menu button, and now I will move down to the Help menu section. The Help menu is broken into several different categories. Main menu Help to tell you what the different topics do, the Run Screen Help, and the General Welding Help. So it gives you a few tips and pointers on how to weld. Let's go into the General Welding Help just as an example. You can see I have attaching the gas tube, attaching the Pulsar stylus, how to do that correctly. We have correct gas flow, how to do a pulsar weld, how to use the tack mode. Let's say I'm not as familiar with the spot welding or resistance welding mode, and I would go into that menu. Now you'll notice that there's an arrow here that says there's more text. So I could easily scroll down and read that more. When I'm done, I'll push the menu button to get out of that, and you'll see I'm back one menu. Let's say I'm done with all the help that I want. I can simply push the Run Stop button, and it'll take me all the way out of the menu system. So that gives us a basic overview of the Orion menu system. Very simple to use, very powerful. You can adjust every aspect of the welding process. The welder comes with factory settings that are very good. Most users may never adjust the settings, but they have that option. It gives them a lot of flexibility, a lot of power.